One of the reasons I love the Bible is because when we read it, we find our own story in here. All the way through there are these accounts that when we read them, we think, that's my story. The story of Jesus and Zacchaeus is my story. It's found in the 19th chapter of Luke. In the story, Jesus simply invites himself to Zacchaeus' home. Remember when we used to sing in Bible school? Zacchaeus was a wee little man, and we ended by saying, Zacchaeus, I'm coming to your house today. Hazel Dameron was like Jesus to me. I was quite like Zacchaeus, I suspect. Early one October morning in 1956, the doorbell rang. I went to the front door, and there stood Hazel, food in one basket, toys in the other, and she said to me, Barbara, I'm giving you a day. Hazel was a member of the Sacramento, California congregation, which had welcomed us in January 1955 when Dick was assigned to the U.S. Army in Sacramento. We quickly became part of the church family, were elected youth leaders. Dick was ordained an elder while we were there. That morning, I welcomed Hazel into our apartment. As she placed her basket on the table, she repeated, I'm giving you this day. Go now, get dressed, and spend the day any way you want. Startled, I went in the bedroom, got dressed, and came back out. And as I stood there, she said, now. And she pressed money in my hand and said, you go wherever you want to go now. Meet Dick tonight and go out to supper, and don't come back until you've had an evening together. This is my gift to you, this day. She kissed me on the cheek, patted my shoulder, and closed the door. Somewhat in a daze, I left Hazel to grandmother my two young sons and nearly danced my way to the public library in downtown Sacramento, which was my favorite place. I didn't even eat lunch that day. I just sat in the library or walked in the library. I looked at books. I found favorite books. I found the one I hadn't finished that I'd had to check in, so I checked it out again. I found books for the children. And then I sat at the table and just read and had this glorious Kairos time in which there was no sense of time at all. At 5 o'clock, I met Dick outside his office, and we went to a small cafe nearby. After a wonderful meal together, completely uninterrupted, I might add, we walked home hand in hand, basking in what Hazel was doing for us and for our family. Her gift to me is a perfect example of the disciples' generous response. So many times I hear that phrase used during the offertory. But that day, it was so much more than the money, which was also part of it. Hazel gave herself. She offered herself. She gave me a whole day of her life. Her gift of herself, her time and her money, embodies compassion and generosity that changed my life. Now, more than 57 years later, I still hear those words in my mind when I first awakened. I'm giving you this day. Hazel's gift of a day reminds me that God gives me a day, each one of us. And how I use that day, the way I share, the way I reach out, calls me to a life of generosity such as Hazel's, to discern the way she did. I want to respond to God's gift of every day, every precious day, by seeing the life of Christ in the other and bearing a joyful spirit of hospitality. I want my generous response to include more than simply money, which is very important. I want my generous response to include the gift of myself, the gift of my time, the compassion, the caring, the outreach that embodied everything that Hazel did for me. I am so grateful that the offering we can give can carry ourselves to others. May this always be so. Amen.